Hey everybody, C here, and welcome back to another episode of Anime Season 5. Coming in at number 20, we have Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, personally, I initially thought about having this a bit higher on the list. Um, However, there are certain events that have happened throughout the last few years that have caused me to have just the slightest bit of resentment for this series. A certain website uh, with a long list of anime uh, continues to put this anime above all other animes that are deserving of praise, and just continues to just the mods of this website continue to downvote anything that comes even remotely close to the number one spot, just to ensure that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood stays in the number one spot for all eternity. Um, and that honestly has left such a sour taste in my mouth that it is hard. It's actually gotten a little hard to like this as much as I used to. I still love this series. Don't get me wrong. I still think it is a fantastic series. Definitely worth the praise that it gets. But I cannot help but feel a bit of just a tiny sliver of resentment, uh, knowing that there are so many animes that deserve praise, and the mods of this particular website, which I will not name, continue to downvote every single one of those just so that they don't get close to overtaking Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And that is just not okay. That is just horrible. That is just absolutely terrible. And yeah, so it is difficult for me to have this any higher on the list. Um, for that reason, and because most of the other animes further up on this list, I just have such a strong nostalgic connection to, or I think are just so incredibly good. I cannot put them any lower. Um, so it is a combination of those three things. Um, but as far as the series itself goes, it's what can I say? It's Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It is. It took everything that it took everything that was horrible about the original Fullmetal Alchemist series and just pretended like it didn't happen. A complete reboot for the series. While the first season of Brotherhood sped things right along, like they got through the they got through those first seven or 7.5 volumes of the manga. They got through that so quickly, and that's because that stuff was already covered in the first original anime. In the original anime, all that stuff was already covered, so they didn't want to spend too long just retreading things that fans had already seen. So they spent those just season one, just 13 episodes, covering all that stuff again because it is still important. It is still important stuff. Uh, but they didn't want to bog the series down by having that take too long when they knew that fans had already seen that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that it only took them the first season to get past that point. And then season two and onward was just such a ride to go through. Um, I remember I would sit. This was back when this was during a time when anime would air um, quite frequently, uh, quite frequently on TV. Not just Toonami, but Toonami has become like the main the main TV channel for watching anime, but there were a handful of other channels where you could watch anime. And I remember catching most of season 2 and 3 on television. Seasons 2 and 3 I watched on television, and then I got the DVD sets for all 3 seasons. And then I heard that season 4 was and then I heard season 4 was going to be coming out on DVD, which I hadn't yet seen. And I got it, and I was just eagerly awaiting the final season. I was eagerly awaiting the final season, and I watched this completely in dub. I would later go on to watch the subtitled version, which is still good. It is still fantastic. But I have such a strong connection with the dub cast for a lot of these characters. When I think about what they sound, when I think about what these characters sound like, I immediately think of the dub cast. I do not think of the Japanese cast. And I am perfectly fine with subtitles. Like 8 times out of 10, I will prefer the subtitles over the English subtitles over the English dub. There are those rare exceptions where I feel like the dub is either on par with the sub, or even more rarely, better than the sub. It doesn't happen often, but once in a blue moon, I find a dub that I really enjoy. And this was one of those cases. I cannot differentiate these characters from their English dub voices. I still love the heck out of the Japanese with English subtitles. I think that's really good too. But as far as my favorite character, it honestly is a toss-up between, as far as male characters, it's a tie between Greed, specifically Greed, not the Prince of Shing, just like Greed, and Roy Mustang. Like, those are like my 2 favorite male characters in the show. Now, as far as female characters go, that is an easy Hawkeye. Hawkeye is just the coolest. And she was certainly one of my big anime crushes back then. Brotherhood came out in 2009. 2009, and the original anime, here we go. The original anime came out in 2003. So the original anime came out in 2003, where Brotherhood came out in 2009, 6 years later. And it ended, the original anime ended in 2004. So we had to wait a good 5 years before we would see the series return. And I watched the original Fullmetal Alchemist. I watched it because there was no other adaptation of the manga at the time, so I didn't really have a choice. And I loved the manga, and I wanted to see more. I craved more. So I watched the original anime, and nowadays I'm never going back. I never go back to it. It is awful, with the exception of a handful of episodes that were somewhat entertaining. I don't go back to it. Let me see. The only episodes I remember being entertaining, there were the 2 episodes that were never covered in Brotherhood. There was the train ride. There was the train ride to meet up with Roy Mustang, and then there was the mining. There was the mining town, which Brotherhood ends up going back to several times, and yet we never actually saw the events that took place, and like the introduction of all those characters in the mining town that would continue to appear constantly throughout Brotherhood. You'd think they would want to include that episode, but no, they didn't include it for whatever reason. I have no idea. And that chapter also introduced a reoccurring character in the series, and like in Brotherhood, they just kind of like they made a joke about how his whole story happened off screen. They made a joke about how that whole story happened off screen. It's like I honestly would have liked to have seen the actual story. That was a good chapter in the manga. That was a good one of the good early chapters, and I would have liked to have seen it. It really showed how clever. It really showed how clever and cunning Ed was in the early chapters. Because in the first couple chapters, in the first couple episodes, we got to see just how strong he was. We got to see just how strong he was when he was fighting Father Cornelio, and that was really cool. It was great to see how strong he was, but we needed to see just how cunning he was, just how intelligent he was, and I liked that he was able to come up with such a great plan for freeing this mining town. It really showed just how smart he actually was. Um, but but yeah. So in any case, those two episodes were both entertaining from the original. And then there were two episodes. There were two episodes I remember that each told three separate mini stories, and these mini stories were actually special short bonus chapters at the end of different volumes of the manga. And so it was great to see those little mini stories get adapted, and they were funny. They were funny mini stories. They were very, very funny, very entertaining. Um, and I really liked those two episodes, and I would have liked to have seen those be added to Brotherhood as well. And the only other episodes I can think of that I actually kind of enjoyed, I remember there was a two-part episode about these two brothers that were pretending to be the Elric brothers. And I remember finding that two-part episode to be entertaining. And then there was one about like a sinking city and a thief, like a Lupin the Third type thief, and complete with like complete with an incompetent detective trying to hunt the thief down. Um, and and That episode I remember being pretty funny. I remember I liked that episode, and honestly, I think that's about it. So, I mean, aside from those 7 episodes from the original series, those are really the only episodes that I actually found interesting, that I actually found entertaining from the original series. I Those are the only episodes from the original series that I will actually go back to on occasion. But other than that, I'm just rewatching Brotherhood, because that is the canon story. That is the story that I know and love from the manga, and it's what I want to see animated. Um, but yeah, it is just a fantastic series, and the animation still holds up very well. It is still very good, even freaking 13 years later. Let me see, when did the last episode air? The last episode. When was the last episode? It was November 2010. So 12 years. 12 years after, almost 12 years. About 11 and a half years after it, 11, it's been 11 and a half years since Brotherhood ended. Come November, it will be, 12 years. That's insane. So, and it still holds up. It still holds up. It's incredible. It's a great series. Absolutely love it. It's not perfect by any means. There are some issues that I take with some of the characters and some of the decisions made, and some of the corners that had to be cut from the manga in order to adapt enough material to end each season on a satisfying note. Um, so, like, I do have some issues with it, but overall, I think that the series is very good, and I'm sure I will end up rewatching the series many more times before my life is out. So, uh, that's all I really got to say about that. This one actually managed to get past the 15-minute mark, so that's awesome. But in any case, that's going to do it for me, and I will see you all in number 19. Take care, everybody.